Hi, guys. All right, I'm going to read the next couple chapters in Frindle. So this is going to be chapter 4 and chapter 5. All right, chapter 4, Word Detective. It was a beautiful September afternoon. Bright sun, cold breeze, blue sky, but not for Nick. Nick had to do a little report for the next day, plus copy out all the definitions for 35 words. For Miss Granger, this was not the way school was supposed to work, not for Nick. There was a rule at Nick's house: homework first, and that meant right after school. Nick had heard his older brother James groan and grumble about this rule for years, right up until he graduated from high school 2 years ago. And then James wrote home from college after his first semester and said, "My grades are looking great because when I came here, I already knew how to put first things first." That letter was the proof Nick's mom and dad had been looking for. Homework first was the law from September to June. Here's Nick. You see how he feels about the homework first rule? He didn't look too excited, does he? All right. This had never bothered Nick before because he hardly ever had homework. Oh, sure, he looked over his spelling words on Thursday nights, and there had been a few short book reports in fourth grade, but other than that, nothing. Up to now, schoolwork never spilled over into his free time. Thanks to Miss Granger, those days were gone. First, he looked up the definitions in the brand new red dictionary that his mom had bought because Miss Granger told her to. It took almost an hour. He could hear a baseball game in John's yard down the street, yelling and shouting, and every few minutes the sharp crack of a bat connecting with a pitch. But he had a report to do for Miss Granger. Nick looked at the very front of the dictionary, and there was an introduction to the book called Words and Their Origins. Perfect, Nick thought. It was just what he needed to do his report. It would all be over in a few minutes. Nick could already feel the sun and the breeze on his face as he ran outside to play. Homework all done. Then he read the first sentence from the introduction. Without question, this modern American dictionary is one of the most surprisingly complex and profound documents ever to be created, for it embodies unparalleled etymological detail reflecting not only superb lexicographic scholarship, but also the dreams and speech and imaginative talents of millions of people over thousands of years. For every person who has ever spoken or written in English has had a hand in its making. What? Nick scratched his head and read it again, and then again. Not much better. It was sort of like trying to read the ingredients on a shampoo bottle. He slammed the dictionary shut and walked downstairs. Nick's family did a lot of reading, so bookshelves covered 3 of the 4 walls in the family room. There were 2 sets of encyclopedias. The black set was for the grown-ups, and the red set was for the kids. Nick pulled out the D volume of the red set and looked up dictionary. There were 3 full pages with headings like early dictionaries, word detectives, and dictionaries today. Not very exciting, but he had to do it, so Nick just plopped down on the couch and read all of it. And when he was finished with the kids' book, he opened the black encyclopedia and read most of what it said about dictionaries, too. He understood only about half of what he read. He leaned back on the couch and covered his eyes with his arm, trying to imagine himself giving a report on all this boring stuff. He'd be lucky to have 3 minutes worth. But because Nick was Nick, he suddenly had an idea, and it brought a grin to his face. Nick decided that giving this report could actually be fun. He could make it Oh, excuse me. He could make it into something special. After all, Miss Granger had asked for it. All right, we are now on chapter 5. This is the report. By lunchtime the next day, Nick had a bad feeling in the pit of his stomach. Seventh period was coming. He was going to have to stand up in front of Miss Granger's class. The eyes of everyone in class would be glued to his face, and Miss Granger's eyes would be cranked up to maximum punch power. He looked over his notes again and again. The first English dictionary, the growth of the English language, William Shakespeare, words from French and German, new words, old words, new inventions, Anglo-Saxon words, Latin and Greek words, American English, it all became a big jumble in his mind. And his grand plan from the night before, and the harsh fluorescent light of the school day, it seemed impossible. What is it with the clocks in school? When you're planning to go to the carnival after school, the clocks in every class practically run backward, and the school day lasts for about 3 weeks. But if you have to go to the barber or go shopping for clothes, then zip, the whole day is over before you can blink. And today, after lunch, periods 5 and 6 went by in 2 ticks. As the seventh period bell rang, Miss Granger walked into the classroom, took 4 steps to her desk at the side of the room, flipped open her attendance book, glanced out at the class, and made 2 little check marks. Then, looking up at Nick, she said, "I think we have a little report to begin our class today. Nicholas." 15 seconds into seventh period, and Nick was on stage. This lady plays for keeps, thought Nick. He gulped, grabbed his crumpled up note cards and his book bag, and walked to the front of the room. He stood next to the giant dictionary on its little table, and Miss Granger walked to the back of the classroom and sat firmly on a tall stool next to the bookcases. She was wearing her blue uniform. Taking a deep breath, Nick began. "Well, the first thing I learned is that the first English dictionary." Miss Granger interrupted. "Excuse me, Nicholas, but does your report have a title?" Nick looked blankly at her. "A title? No, no, I didn't make a title." Class, please remember to include a title whenever you prepare an oral or written report. Now, please go on, Nicholas. And she smiled and nodded at him. Nick began again. Looking right at Miss Granger, he said, "The dictionary." A couple of kids thought that was funny, but Nick played it straight and just kept talking. A lot of people think that the first English dictionary was put together in the 1700s by a man named Samuel Johnson. He lived in London, England. He was real smart and he wrote a lot of books, and he wanted all the other smart people to have a good dictionary to use. So he made one. But there were other dictionaries before his. The thing that was different about Johnson's dictionary was its size, first of all. He had over 43,000 words in it. The class made a bunch of noise at this big number, ooh and wow, and stuff like that, and Nick lost his concentration. He glanced up at Mrs. Granger, expecting to see those eyes drilling a hole in him. But they weren't. They were almost friendly, in a teachery kind of way. She shushed the class and said, "Go on, Nicholas, that's a fine beginning." Nick almost smiled, but he saw all the kids staring at him, so he gripped his note cards even tighter and jumped back in. The other thing that Samuel Johnson did that was special was to choose the words he thought were most important, and then give lots of examples showing how the words got used by people. For example, he showed how the word take could be used in 113 different ways. Nick's report went on smoothly for 12 minutes. Nick was surprised at how easy it was to stand there and talk about this stuff. At the end of the first 5 minutes, Miss Granger had to stop Nick again to say, "Class, it is not good manners to yawn out loud or to put your heads down on your desk when speaking me on when someone is giving an oral report." Excuse me. No one in the class cared one little bit about the report, except for Miss Granger. Every time Nick glanced up, she was smiling, and her eyes were not the least bit icy or sharp. She was eating this stuff up, listening and nodding, and every once in a while she would say, "Very good point," or "Yes, that's exactly right." But the next time Nick looked up, he saw Miss Granger sneaking a look at her watch. 18 minutes had gone by. Maybe his idea was going to work after all. Time for phase two. Reaching into his book bag, Nick pulled out He pulled out the red dictionary he brought from home, the one most of the kids had, the one Miss Granger said that they should use. Nick said, "This is the dictionary that I use at home for my vocabulary work." And I opened it last night to the very front, and right there I found out a lot more about how the dictionary was made, right in this book. So I thought some of the ideas would be good as part of my report. It says here, Nicholas. Nick looked up. Miss Granger got off her tall stool, and its wooden legs made a screech on the linoleum. Heads snapped to attention, and the class was alert again. Miss Granger smiled, raised her eyebrows, and pointed at her watch. Nicholas, I think the class should read that at home themselves. Now, John's hand was up in the air, and at Miss Granger's nod, he said, "But I don't have that dictionary at home, Miss Granger. I have the blue one." And several other kids immediately said, "Me too." Miss Granger tried not to show that she was annoyed. "Very well, Nick, but it shouldn't take too long. We have other things to do today." Nick kept his eyes open wide and nodded, adjusted his glasses on his nose, and began to read. Without question, this modern American dictionary is one of the most surprisingly complex and profound documents ever to be created, for it embodies unparalleled the mythological detail, reflecting not only superb lexicographic scholarship, but also the dreams and speech and imaginative talents of millions of people over thousands of years. For every person who has ever spoken or written in English has had a hand in its making. It was a long article, and the kids were bored to death, but no one looked bored at all. Every kid in the room knew now that the period was half over, that Nick's report wasn't just a report. It was one of the greatest time wasters he had ever invented. Miss Granger knew it too. She had edged around from the back of the room to the side near the windows. Nick glanced up at her now and then as he read, and each time Miss Granger's eyes clicked up to a new power level. After 8 minutes of Nick's best nonstop reading, her eyes were practically burning holes in the chalkboard behind him. There were only 10 minutes left in seventh period. When he took a breath to start a new paragraph, Miss Granger cut him off. "That's a fine place to stop, Nicholas. Class, let's all give him a round of applause for his report." The applause didn't last long. As Nick took his book bag and notes and sat down, Miss Granger's eyes went back to almost normal, and she actually smiled at him. "Although your report was a little long," she paused to let that sink in, "it was quite a good one. And isn't it fascinating that English has more different words than any other language used anywhere in the world?" She pointed at her large dictionary. "That one book contains the definitions of more than 450,000 words. Now, wasn't I right, Nicholas? All this will mean so much more to you since you learned about it on your own." Miss Granger was beaming at him. Nick sat lower in his chair. It was worse than writing the report, worse than standing up to give it. He was being treated like the teacher's pet, and he had the feeling she was doing it on purpose. His reputation was in great danger, so he launched another question. He raised his hand, and he didn't even wait for Miss Granger to call on him. "Yeah, but I still don't really get the idea of why words all mean different things. Like, who says dog means a thing that goes woof and wags its tail? Who says so?" And Miss Granger took the bait. "Who says dog means dog? You do, Nicholas. You and I, everyone in this class, in this school, and this town and state and this country, we all agree. If we lived in France, we would all agree that the right word for that hairy four-legged creature was a different word, chin. It sounds like chien, but it means what dog means to you and me." This page says, who says that dog means dog? They have some pictures of some different dogs there. All right, and it's got a bunch of different ways to say dog in a bunch of different languages. So in Germany, they would say Hund and so on, all around the globe. But if all of us Excuse me. Excuse me. But if all of us in this room decided to call that creature something else, and if everyone else did too, then that's what it would be called. And one day it would be written in the dictionary that way. We decide what goes in that book. And she pointed to the giant dictionary, and she looked right at Nick, and she smiled again. Then Miss Granger went on, but of course that dictionary was worked on by hundreds of very smart people for many years. So as far as we are concerned, that dictionary is the law. Laws can change, of course, but only if they need to. There may be new words that need to be made, but the ones in that book have been put there for good reasons. Miss Granger took a look at the clock. 8 minutes left. Now then, for today you were to have done the exercises beginning on page 12 in your Words Alive book. Please get out your papers. Sarah, will you read the first sentence, identify the mistake, and tell us how you corrected it? Ms. Granger jammed the whole day's work into the last 18 minutes, a blur of verbs and nouns and prepositions. And yes, there was another homework assignment. And Nick didn't try to sidetrack Miss G again. He had slowed her down a little, but had he stopped her? No way. She was unstoppable. At least for today. All right, so that is the end of chapter 5 for our Frindle book.